to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, December 17th, 2015. One more week until Christmas Eve. And the Lady Claire is going crazy trying to whip her choir into shape for the big show. And I keep telling her probably work a lot better if she used real whips, but she's not that way. So, we're dealing with all of those issues. And, of course, I'm her roadie, so I'm plugging the wires in and running the amps and all the rest of that stuff. All right, we have got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, obviously, there is the issue between Turkey, Russia, Syria, and the United States is very complex and is getting more obfuscated as the days go by, where we're hearing people say one thing, then they seem to do another, and it's going back and forth, and all the players are trying to jockey to get what they want without alerting their indigenous population that some skullduggery is up here. Now, we're seeing these articles like this one over in Global Research. You want war, Russia's ready for war. And it's going back to Zbigniew Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, published in 1997, which was echoing the then prevalent political agenda coming out of the Project for the New American Century, saying the United States was the world's remaining superpower. It was the destiny of the United States to rule the entire world, and any countries that get in our way and refuse to do as they're told, like, for example, Russia or China, would have to be made war on. And we are seeing those machinations continuing, although at this point, it is far from a certainty that the U.S. will be able to prevail in a conventional war against Russia and China, and we're hearing more and more military experts coming forward and saying the U.S. could even lose a nuclear exchange. So it's a very, very dangerous time, and unfortunately, the future destiny of planet Earth and the human race is in the hands of whichever world leader is the least mentally stable, and there is a large lineup for straitjackets among the ruling class all around the globe here. Now, David Cameron is getting ready to launch more war into Syria. They're going to have humanitarian boots on the ground early next spring. And what Cameron is trying to do, what Obama is trying to do, is go back to the scam they had been playing up until Russia's entry into Syria, which is, we're not making war on Syria and Assad. We're making war on ISIS. It's just a chain of tragic accidents that we keep bombing Syrian food storage and water treatment plants and power stations. You know, these weapons we've got, they're old and we should buy new ones, but, it's really just an accident. But they're still making the sounds that they want to try and go back in and conquer Syria by force. And, of course, Russia is not going to allow that happen. And we're beginning to see some schisms open up between the different factions in both the British and the U.S. governments, between those who are still out there saying, we want war, we don't care, like John McCain, and other leadership which seems to be waking up to the reality that this agenda to conquer the world's resource-rich areas and shackle them to the dollars has failed, is failing, is crumbling, cannot be carried through to a successful outcome. Now, we're seeing articles like over here in INFOWARS, Obama concedes to Putin after NATO's support of ISIS exposed. And we heard it with John Kerry in Moscow talking to Sergei Lavrov, saying that the U.S. has officially dropped their demand that Assad must go right now for there to be any deal and any transition whatsoever. Now, that doesn't rule out the U.S. trying to take out Assad by more direct means. But the official policy is, okay, it's up to the Syrian people to decide who they want as president, even if it's somebody we don't like. Now, the United Nations Security Council just anonymously adopted a resolution targeting ISIS finances And this, of course, is aimed directly at Turkey and the ruling family, who are caught in the middle of this exposure that ISIS has been stealing oil from Syria, trucking it across the border into Turkey. Erdogan's son is apparently the middleman and the broker, shipping it out on his oil tankers through a port one-third owned by Goldman Sachs. But the United States couldn't realistically veto this UN Security Council resolution without basically advertising to the world that they were complicit in this looting of Syria's oil. So it's going to be a serious crimp on Erdogan's finances, and his son's finances, and obviously on ISIS itself. Now, there's another article that's out here, and this is over in Russia Today, Washington's Plan B in Syria. Renewed military intervention to oust Assad. Now, at this point, Russia is in command of the skies over Syria, along with the Syrian government. And so the only option left is for the U.S. and its fellow plunderers to go in on the ground. And again, they are doing this without the permission of Syria's government. That's an act of war. And they're trying to go in there. And we're hearing that repeatedly from the government of Syria, the government of Britain. U.S. and British forces are not welcome here. But as John McCain said on that video the other day, who cares what they want? They don't count. All right, earlier in the week, it had been reported Turkey was starting to pull their troops out of Iraq and conceding that. Unfortunately, today, there was a rocket attack on the Turkish base, killing 7 Kurds and giving Turkey an excuse to start sending their troops back in. We have to protect our people. Well, they wouldn't have been hurt if they hadn't been there. So they're already trying to manipulate their way around that. Britain is preparing to send 1,000 troops and special forces into Libya to deal with the rise of ISIS, of course. Actually, that's not what's going on over there. What's going on over there is the government of Libya has asked Russia to come on in and help them deal with the ISIS terrorists. And so Britain has hit the panic button because Russia's getting invited into all these areas that the U.S. and Britain coveted. And they don't know what to do. All they can do is keep on the same thing. We're really after ISIS. We're after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Really, you should pay no attention to us giving weapons and to ISIS and buying their oil and everything. Really, that's just wacko tinfoil hat wingnut conspiracy theory. You are supposed to hate ISIS and just go along with conquering these countries where we tell you ISIS is in. And it's definitely not working here. Now, earlier in the week, Saudi Arabia came out with this grandiose announcement that they had formed a 34-state coalition in the Middle East in order to go into Iraq and Syria to deal with ISIS. And a lot of people were kind of chuckling at that because Saudi Arabia is one of the nations that is known to be funding and supporting ISIS. And it gets even worse than that because today, a lot of the nations that were named as part of Saudi Arabia's coalition are saying, what? We never said anything about that. Nobody even asked us. Saudi Arabia just sort of made it up to try and create a case for the Middle East will take care of the Middle East's problems and Russia should get out. And that one's falling apart. All right, we're coming up here on our first commercial break, and we'll be back with more about what's going on in Syria and Turkey. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we're seeing the very interesting article over here in Voice of America, where the U.S. and Turkey, despite their recent disagreements, are poised for a joint anti-ISIS operation. Okay? Except it's not in Turkey. Once again, it's in Syria, and they're actually saying this is a joint U.S.-Turkey operation aimed at taking control of a 98-kilometer strip of the Turkey-Syria border used by the Islamic State militants. We know what's really going on. They want to make sure those border crossings remain open for those oil trucks. That's what's going on. Russia has shut down almost completely the flow of stolen Syrian oil going into Turkey. And the U.S. and Turkey want to grab control of that border, including presumably the airspace over it, to keep that oil going. Otherwise, Erdogan's son is in serious legal trouble because he can't complete the contracts he's signed to deliver that oil. Now, all of a sudden, Putin is starting to talk tough. Normally, he's very low-key, he's very understated, but basically he's now out there, he's apparently lost his temper with Turkey, and he's basically saying, any Turkish planes caught in Syria will be shot down. And then he made a reference to Erdogan licking a certain point of the U.S. government's anatomy, which caught a lot of people by surprise, because Putin normally doesn't engage in that kind of rhetoric. Now, as you know, Turkey has accused a member of their parliament of treason for confirming that Turkey was smuggling the precursors for sarin nerve gas across the border into Syria into the hands of ISIS. And there's a very interesting article over at Sputnik News saying this is basically Turkey admitting it's true. Because if it wasn't true, they wouldn't overreact this way. They'd just say, prove it. I dare you to prove it. They're hitting this guy with a treason charge to shut him up. The overreaction signals guilt. Another article coming out of Chicago Post. Alarming evidence suggests ISIS is now a U.S.-Israel proxy army. Well, Chicago Post is a little behind the times. We've kind of known that for years, that this is what's been going on. But we're starting to see even people who haven't been paying attention, they're waking up and saying there is something not right about what's going on. Now, up in Ukraine, Kiev has apparently just signed a deal or an understanding with NATO that commits NATO to the defense of Ukraine, even though Ukraine is still technically not part of NATO. Basically opening up the door. If Poroshenko can start an outright war with Russia, NATO will pour on in, and we'll be into World War III. It'll be fun. So you lose some of your children. It's going to be great. We'll give you a little medal in place of your kid here. Now, Vladimir Putin has issued a decree bringing to an end the free trade treaty between Russia and Ukraine. It's effective as of the new year, in 2 weeks. And it's because of Kiev's constant warmongering. It's because Kiev has signed on to the anti-Russian economic sanctions. It's because Kiev continues to suck gas out of that pipeline and refuse to pay for it. And over in Kiev, they're starting to show the strain. The president of Ukraine just wanted to be the first to congratulate Pope Francis on his 80th birthday. Actually, the Pope just turned 79. So he's a year ahead. But yes, he's the first. He's the first one to congratulate the Pope on his 80th birthday, which is still a year away. Now, over in Yemen, as the ceasefire falters, Saudi airstrikes are pounding Yemen. And Yemen is saying that they're starting the bombing again because they're responding to Houthi hostility. They're not actually saying what that is. Maybe somebody, their election, and there are accusations of massive corruption throughout the government, which I think at this point we understand all governments tend toward corruption. That's why people go into politics, because it opens up the wellspring of wealth to pour all over them. And apparently during an election appearance, the Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, was punched. Some guy just walked up and slammed him in the face. It wasn't a love tap either. Now, here in the United States, the Obama administration and the United Nations have announced a global police force to fight extremism in the United States. This was announced by Attorney General Loretta Lynch. saying the U.S. Department of Justice will be working directly with the United Nations to fight extremism in the U.S. Why do we need a global police force to fight extremism in the U.S.? Well, in order to bypass Congress. That's what this is all about. The United Nations says, you have to do this, you have to do that. Oh, well, we got to do that. You know, we don't have to go to Congress for approval. That's the United Nations is saying that. And the reason I think we should all be concerned about it is extremism is one of those fluffy, ill-defined words that can be made to mean anything, including not believing the government's stories. Oh, you're an extremist. You think Sandy Hook was a false flag. You think 9/11 was a false flag. You must be an extremist if you don't believe what the government and corporate media tell you. And reinforcing this concern of mine, we have over at Slate, they're pushing the idea, because of ISIS, we have to consider limits to freedom of speech. Because ISIS is out there radicalizing people. Well, you know, actually we don't need to limit freedom of speech. Computer security experts, white hat hackers, have traced the ISIS Twitter accounts back to British and now Saudi Arabian government offices. All we got to do is shut down those government offices and ISIS will go away on the internet. Wouldn't that be cool? We could shut down site intelligence and Rita Katz. There wouldn't be any more of these slickly produced Hollywood videos of phony beheadings. It'd be very, very easy to shut down ISIS. Stop signing the paychecks going to them. Now, as you know, the gun grabbers are out there pushing for anybody who's on any government watch list to be denied their Second Amendment rights. We have reason to be suspicious of you, therefore you are not a citizen anymore and you don't get the Bill of Rights. There's a little bit of a wrinkle with that. We'll talk about that when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, as you know, the gun grabbers are out there pushing this idea that if you are on some kind of a government watch list, you are obviously not to be trusted with a weapon, and that is justification to suspend your Second Amendment rights. Actually, no. The Second Amendment is pretty clear. Shall not be infringed. And the United States Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Miller that the Second Amendment reserves to the American people the same weapons carried by the uniformed forces. That's where we are with that. It is very easy to get on one of these lists. There's some 74 different categories of Americans, including those who believe in conspiracy theories, that will get you on a watch list. Now, believing or accepting conspiracy, or even reading about them, doesn't make you a dangerous person, except, of course, to the liars. And the problem is, even the most ardent supporters of the need for watch lists agree the vast majority of people on them shouldn't be on them. They're just thrown on literally at whim. And a good example of that, we talked about it earlier in the year, Rahina Ibrahim. She's a Malaysian architect. She has a doctorate from Stanford University. She got invited to attend a conference in the United States of America and was denied a visa because her name is on a watch list. She took them to court. And the court said, yes, you should not have been put on the watch list. We're ordering your name to be removed. She still can't get a visa to come to the United States of America for academic conferences. Her name has been ordered erased from the list. Nobody knows how to do it. They can't figure it out. Now then, there's another article over here we need to pay attention to. This is from Solari.com. And they're talking about the scandal around Homan Square, which is an Abu Ghraib-like facility right in the middle of the United States of America in Chicago, Illinois, where people arrested by the Chicago police were taken No paper trail, no lawyer, no notification of the family, and they were tortured into confessing the crimes they had not committed. And this article over at Solari is saying this is a prototype for domestic rendition here in the United States of America. Doesn't get more Nazi than that. Every American who turned a blind eye to the horrible practices that were being committed in other countries conquered by the United States of America by leaders who were trained to be that way at the School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia. You need to wake up because now they're applying those same tactics to us, we the people. Now, down in Florida, there's a professor, James Tracy. He teaches Culture of Conspiracy at Florida Atlantic University. Conspiracies are what he teaches. And he has questions about Sandy Hook, based on all of the inconsistencies in the official story, the growing body of data brought out by Wolfgang Halberg and people just like him, and because he's not accepting the official story of Sandy Hook, even though he's a professor of conspiracy theories, he got fired. You will believe as we tell you to believe, or you will lose your livelihood. Now, speaking of conspiracy theories, there's a very enlightening article over at Sputnik News. The U.S. is claiming to have all this information about the Paris terror attacks and the trail of cash and the trail of guilt. And not too surprisingly, the government of France is saying, would you share it with us? And the U.S. is saying, no, we can't share this with you. It'll expose our sources. It will compromise investigations. You just take our word for it. Who did this? And you go kill them for us. Anyway, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Nathan in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's actually Nader, not Nathan, but
Nader?
That's okay.
Okay, well,
yeah.
All right.
So
I'm old. My eyes are going bad.
That's all right. My name's kind of unique, so. No, I'd just like to say a few things before I go off the air, but I'm a huge, huge fan of your show. I recommend it to everyone that I come across. And I just want to say, for those who are listening to the What Really Happened show and listen to it on a regular basis, we need to pool our resources and we need to fund programs just like this one because we cannot allow a chance for this show to go off the air. This is a vital time in the history of the world, and we need the truth out.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Secondly, I'd like to say that I truly believe 9/11 is the catalyst that will bring a lot of people to wake up and realize that the government not only lies and has lied in the past, but they've gone to such a deprived state that they're willing to kill 3,000 of their own citizens to bring us into wars. And many people need to wake up to that reality. Look at Building 7, and we need to fund architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, firefighters for 9/11 Truth, and anyone who's willing to bring that message to the public. We need to find a way to preach that and spread that so more people wake up and realize that governments like our own government and the Israeli government are dangerous, and they're not going to stop until they achieve world domination by whatever means, including killing innocent people.
Well, you need to understand, when a government has decided they are going to start a war, they have already made the decision that they're going to send millions of people to their death, and none of the 3,000, it's hardly worth thinking about anymore. Now, for those of you, I think the real watershed moment for America was Saddam's nuclear weapons. And of course, now the government's defenders are saying, we never actually said Saddam had nuclear weapons. We said he might be thinking about them. And they're trying to rewrite history, but they can't in the age of the Internet. But 9/11 is definitely one of their points of maximum vulnerability. And again, that new documentary, Incontrovertible, we've got it linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. It's not a trailer. You can watch the whole thing. It's 2 hours long. And everybody needs to grab that YouTube URL, Put it out on social media. Send it to all your contacts, because it's a well-made film. And this is another film that the government is hoping you're never going to see.
Yes. And one more thing, Mike, before I go off the air. If you and Claire happen to come to Los Angeles, I'd love to take you to the Magic Castle. I'm a member.
So am I.
Oh, fantastic. Maybe we'll go together.
My picture's on the wall. My picture's still on the wall.
Whereabouts in the Magic Castle do you think I'll find?
I actually don't know. I know it got moved, but somebody who was at the castle took a picture of my portrait. It's still up there on the wall someplace. But that's how I paid for my college education, as a professional magician.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm an inspiring mentalist, so I...
Okay. Well, you're very pleased to meet me, and you're fine. How am I?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Glad we share things in common.
Yes, we do there. And thank you very much, and congratulations on being a member of the Magic Castle, because it is not easy to get in there. You have to prove that you know what you're doing. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, who got her job when Dominique, I'm blanking his last name, her predecessor, was accused of a sexual misadventure, which was very dubious at best. But it drove him from the top position. Christine took it over. Turns out Christine's own record isn't all spanky shiny clean either, and she has been dogged for years by what's called the Tappy Affair. And it involves a very shadowy transfer of 400 million euros to French business tycoon and entrepreneur Bernard Tapie, for whom the affair is named. Now, last September, France's top prosecutor, their equivalent of the Attorney General, suggested strongly that the investigation be dropped. Well, the court didn't listen. And as of right now, Christine Lagarde is going to trial over what happened, because she was in charge at the time. And this happened on her watch. And it doesn't seem to have been a case of, she just wasn't paying attention. She was finance minister of the country, and 400 million euros of the French taxpayers' money was handed to this tycoon, which is, I guess, how you become a tycoon. Forget the old-fashioned way of actually coming up with a product people want to buy. Just kiss up to a politician, and they'll just give you taxpayer money, and you'll be rich. As long as you remember those generous campaign donation checks next election cycle. Now, the IMF has done one thing which we can all applaud. That's a very historical occasion when the IMF does something we approve of. IMF is recognizing Ukraine's $3 billion debt to Russia as sovereign, meaning it is the responsibility of the government in Kiev. Now, Kiev was trying to say that this debt for all the unpaid gas was really a civil issue. It was the gas companies that didn't pay it. But the contract for the gas delivery from Russia to Ukraine was signed state to state, not company to company. And the IMF is saying, yeah, Kiev is responsible for this. And Russia is going to launch a lawsuit against Kiev if it doesn't pay by December 20th, which is into the weekend. So that's coming up. Be kind of interesting if Putin repossesses Ukraine. Perfectly legal. Now, as you know, all of the Yahoo gains the stock market made yesterday following the Fed's announced rate increase of 0.25%, they pretty much vanished today. The Dow dropped 250. And even that is not telling the whole story, because we know the stock markets are being rigged by the Plunge Protection Team, also known as the President's Special Working Group on the Markets. And they've been playing this game since back during the Clinton administration. And the way they rig the markets is they go on out and they buy what are called the indicator issues. These are the stocks that are chosen to make up that stock number report for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, for NASDAQ, for Standard & Poor's. They're not valuing all the stocks being traded on their market. they have a tiny subset, the indicator issues. And if you are buying and manipulating those, you can manipulate the entire market up. And not too surprisingly, the indicator issues are being driven up, and all the other stock issues are being neglected. And so over at Investment Watch blog, they have this story about how the divide between the smallest stocks and the big indicator issues is huge and getting worse. So even within the stock market itself, that Dow Industrial Average doesn't really represent what's going on in the stock market as a whole. It's just being driven upward. So the government and Wall Street can use it as a political banner. See, the economy is great. The recession is over. If you're hungry and homeless and lost your business and your home and your job, it's got to be your fault. Don't blame us. See, the stock market's up. Except, of course, today it wasn't up. And I'm wondering if they're going to get their traditional Friday happy ending tomorrow. Because a lot of people are getting spooked. Meanwhile, we are hearing from ETF Daily News the Baltic Dry Index has crashed to a new record low of 471. This is the lowest level in at least 3 decades. China is out there talking about their collapsing export market, saying demand is gone because their biggest customer for Chinese goods has been right here in the United States of America and in Europe. And we don't have the money to buy the stuff anymore. That's where the economy has really broken down. Wall Street and Washington, D.C. were so focused on sucking money up to the top of that pyramid where they could help themselves to it, they forgot that for an economy to continue, there must be some mechanism by which money recycles back down to the bottom of the pyramid in terms of decent wages and salaries for workers so they can pour it back into the pyramid and keep it going again. That's the part that has vanished from our current economy. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, they have this bedroom tax. If you've got an extra bedroom, we're going to tax you for it. It was another way for the British government, which is also, like the rest of the nations, enslaved to private central banks. It's another way to take money away from the people. Now, in Britain, they did nationalize the Bank of England shortly after the pound sterling transferred the role of global currency to the U.S. dollar. But it's still run by pretty much the same rules that it did all the way back to King George III's Currency Act. And this article that we're looking at here, over in the Independent, are saying that half the people who've been hit with the bedroom tax are having to cut back on spending on food in order to pay that tax. 78% of people affected by removal of the spare room subsidy regularly run out of money by the end of the month. 78%. And this underscores something I've been saying for quite some time. The money junkies and the government are still living in a dream world where there's plenty of money out here. They just have to figure out a way to take it. And they're wrong. And each new tax, each new fee, each new increase in price means people are having to do without something else. This oppressive confiscation of money from the people of Europe and the United States is dealing with the law of diminishing returns. There isn't any more out here to take. When more money is taken from us through those sky-high Obamacare health insurance policies, people are doing without something else. They're not buying a new car. They're not buying a new home. So all of this machinations will change who specifically is getting the money, but total economic activity and tax revenues remain flat. And that signals we are at the end of this whole hoax. Now, there's a very alarming article. This came out of silverdoctors.com saying banks and government are raiding retirement savings and stealing billions from the Teamsters, and they're not going to like that. According to silverdoctors.com, over 400,000 Teamster members just received a letter advising their pension benefits have been slashed up to 70%. That's going to make some of these people homeless. Now, the U.S. government has already looted the Social Security Trust Fund. They started doing that in the Clinton years. Now that's about out. So now they're going after private pension funds. They're looting the people. And remember, the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. We're there. We are there right now. And I think it would be healthy for the American people to go ahead and get a little angry and build up a little bit of a hate for the people who have taken advantage of you like this. Hate gets a bad rap. Sometimes it's very useful. Sometimes hate is appropriate when dealing with people who act hatefully. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And we're going to go ahead and grab a couple of phone calls right now. Ralph in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike, I was listening to you talk about the Teamsters pension getting ready to get raided, and it just made me kind of chuckle, and I thought if they really wanted to get some money, they had to raid the teachers' credit account.
Don't give them any ideas.
Yeah, but that would kind of kill two birds with one stone. It'd get them off our back and take these criminal teachers and take some of their
now, wait a minute. Yes, there are some bad teachers, but overall, people go into teaching for some very noble reasons. They know they're not going to get rich doing it. And but we're already seeing where pension funds for all kinds of public workers are under attack. Remember that big stink up in, Wisconsin a couple of years ago? And and basically what it is, government has just decided, out of necessity to preserve their own well-being, that it's time to just start taking more away from the people. Except we really don't have much more to give.
Listen, I got one more question to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my wife does. We were listening to your show a couple of weeks ago, and she tried to get through to you on it, and she couldn't. And she wanted to ask you a question on that Windows 10 thing.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand the phone over to her.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Mike. Sorry about all that coughing in the background. I was choking on pumpkin donut.
Oh, my goodness. Sounds lovely. Except for the coughing part, obviously. But
I know.
Pumpkin donut.
Sorry about that. I heard you a couple weeks ago, and I emailed, but I guess I went through to your advertising instead. I have the Windows 10. At one time I was going to get it, and I went ahead and I told them yes. But now I get a window every day. And in my computer program, it says, I got a bunch of faileds, and then I got a window that pops up every day saying, you ready to install and upgrade? So it's not installed, and I just wonder, I can't figure, yes, because of your program, and I really value your opinion, and I decided not to get it. I have Windows 7.
Okay, there is a tool out there called, I think it's GWX Control Panel. Let me validate that I'm not misstating it. And that can disable all of that nagging stuff. Let's see. GWX Control Panel. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and post the link to that back to WhatReallyHappened.com so that you can download and run it. And as long as Windows 10 has not already started to partially install, you should be okay. You can get to your Windows 7 no problem, correct?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well then...
And I just, when that window comes up about Windows, are you ready to install and upgrade, I just click the X button and close the window. I don't click on anything within that window.
It's really angering a lot of people. Microsoft's arrogance, you will upgrade the operating system. And they're really trying to force everybody onto it. There's absolutely no guarantee from Microsoft that your software that is currently running on Windows 7 or Windows 8 will even work on Windows 10. And they're trying to force you to upgrade your operating system, which means you're going to be forced to buy more software. It's just another way of trying to force more money out of the population. We don't have it. On the day this Windows 7 box stops working, I'm going to go to Linux, and I'll miss my animation software because I still like to play with it from time to time. But I don't respond well to this kind of coercive behavior from American corporations. I mean, I'm an old guy, and I grew up in an era where the wisdom was the customer is always right. And today we live in an era where the attitude of the corporations is the customer is always wrong, they're morons, they don't know what's best for them, we have a right to force them to buy our products.
I know, and I'm so happy that you're going to post that on your website, because I'm sure there's other people who had that same question I did, and I just couldn't get it answered anywhere, but I knew you would.
Well, I'm putting it up right now, and after the next commercial break, it should be visible on the main page.
All right, and you and Claire take care, and have a wonderful evening.
We certainly will, and have a pumpkin donut for us.
If I don't choke on it, thank you.
Well, please don't do that. All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Scott in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Scott in Texas, are you there? Hello, Scott.
Oh, hey, yes, sir. Sorry, I was having to get rid of another call. Hey, I just wanted to do a quick little follow-up. Well, I tell you what, never mind. I'll just have to call you back. Sorry.
All right. That's fine, and we'll let you go here. Now, getting on back to the economy, we are seeing stories all over the place. The one I'm looking at right now is fellowshipoftheminds.com. Retailers are ringing the alarm bells on Christmas sales. It is a disaster. And again, my lady love and I, we had to brave them all this week, and it was crowded, but we didn't see people actually buying. They were looking and looking and looking, trying to find that special something that would meet their budget, and they were coming up short. And we're hearing it from multiple sources. The actual retail sales this Christmas are a disaster, and it's following on previous holiday shopping seasons that have fallen far short of expectations. Why this is a concern is because through years of exploiting Christmas to maximize sales for the year, a lot of retailers are actually running in the red up until Black Friday. And they count on that holiday seasonal rush to put them into the black for the next year. And if they can't do that, they're looking at trouble. And we have already seen a lot of iconic American companies bite the dust. We're hearing rumors that Sears may be in trouble. And so, again, despite all the flogging from the corporate media, people just aren't whipping out that plastic to go holiday shopping here. As a matter of fact, when I got up this morning and I first turned on Fox News, they were hawking Christmas gifts. You know, like they were the shopping channel or something. There's this new pocket-sized digital camera that's just as good as the big professional studio cameras. And, you know, and on and on and on. This is supposed to be a news channel. Telling us about a new product that we're supposed to run out and buy, that's not news. It's product placement. And I'm sure they got paid a certain amount of money to do that. All righty, let's see. We're going to grab a phone call. Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Cameron, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, wonderful. Good afternoon, Michael. Just quickly following up to your previous conversation. If you want to download Linux and you want to run your Windows application, there is an add-on called Play on Linux, and it comes with Wine, which allows you to actually install all your Windows applications.
Well, it can sort of, but it's like incredibly slow. I mean, I have a multi-boot system on this machine here. I've got Windows 7 and Windows XP, the emulator mode, and I've got a Linux on here as well. And I've played around with these systems emulators, and they're okay for basic Windows programs like, you know, Office utilities and stuff, but the animation and graphics programs have to have unfettered access to the hardware accelerators and the graphic card, and that's where these things tend to break down. Because I was never able to install my legally owned license of 3D Studio Max on Windows 7, and I got no support from Microsoft on trying to fix that. And so I put it on the XP emulator, and it doesn't run well at all. It's got all kinds of problems.
Excellent. Just thought I'd let you know, Michael. Thanks ever so much for having me.
All right, well, thank you very much here, and we're going to let you go. We got to take
Right.
a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call here from Judy in New Hampshire. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm also a Windows 7 user, and I had the identical experience as that caller. And it was so frustrating because it was obvious to me it was a malicious pop-up, and I would just try to move it down to the bottom of my screen because it would, whenever my screen was inactive for more than 10 minutes, it would come up. So I'm really happy that you are going to be providing that link to disable it. Thank you so much.
It's up on the main page right now. It's called GWX Control Panel. There's actually a bunch of stuff on the target page. It is the top one. And you basically install it, run it. It'll give you a little set of boxes, and you just click all the options, turn everything off. And it really is very impressive because somebody actually donated a Windows 7 laptop to support the music program at Claire's Church. And because I'm the roadie, I got to basically clean it up and get it ready to go. And I kept noticing, boy, this thing is really slow. Nothing's down. And come to find out, it was downloading all the Windows 10 stuff. And it was all there ready to switch over the instant I hit the wrong button. And I think a lot of people are justifiably upset over the display of this arrogant attitude from Microsoft. You will use the product we want you to have. And we know, first of all, it's loaded with more spyware for the government. And who knows what else is in there? Remotely shut things off, go on in, delete data and files they don't want you to have. I mean, we don't know what's in there. And more importantly, for a lot of people, there has been absolutely no assurance from Microsoft that our current software that is running on Windows 7, which in my case does not include 3D Studio Max, or Windows 8, will run on Windows 10. And that means very costly upgrades to your software, and in most cases, a monthly rental contract with no limits on how much they can raise those rents when they feel they need to make more profit from you. And it absolutely is fascism on display here on the Internet. And people are very upset about it. I would love to stay working with Windows and have my production tools. But I'm finding substitutes that will run on Linux. And when this box dies, I'm going to go to Linux. I'm going to build myself a new white box and go with Linux. And yes, there are indications Linux is also compromised with spyware, but at least it's going to be an operating system of my choosing and software of my choosing, because I can write a lot of the stuff I actually need. I'm a moderately decent coder. I got back into the habit when I was writing my NSA encryption challenges, and programming can be addictive.
Well, this whole thing with Windows 10 kind of sort of resonates with the whole idea of vaccines. You know?
Yeah. You will buy this product.
Yeah, we don't really know what's in it.
We don't care if you don't want it. We don't care if it's not working. We don't care if it's junk. And I think one of the resistance that Microsoft is dealing with is that it almost seems like they'll come out with an operating system, and it will just be full of problems. And just at the time all the problems are worked out and you've got a smoothly working system, they want to change the operating system again. And it's using up huge amounts of our time to basically rebuild what we had before. And I think a lot of people are very irritated by that.
Yeah, it's obsolescence, planned obsolescence.
Okay.
That is worse.
It is.
So much,
it's intentional obsolescence. And by the way, during the Depression of the 1930s, there was actually an attempt by Congress to legally mandate planned obsolescence. When you bought a product, like a washing machine, it was stamped with an expiration date, and if you were caught using it past that date, you would be fined. And, of course, it didn't go anywhere. For the same reason they got the problem now. We don't have the money to go along with all this nonsense, this equine excrement that's coming out of Wall Street and Washington, D.C. to steal the last few pennies from our pockets. Okay,
I don't think we have the landfills to even hold all the junk that's being, dumped from the planned obsolescence.
No, it's a huge environmental problem. We're already hearing where all of this electronic waste, when they try and recycle it, it's highly toxic. And, you've got Al Gore out there screaming about carbon dioxide and saving the earth, but none of these people will talk about the very high economic and environmental cost of planned obsolescence and limited lifespan products.
I agree. Thanks so much, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Judy, we're going to let you go. Now then, speaking of planned obsolescence, we were talking yesterday about how over in New York, they're crowdsourcing speed tests of their internet service providers, or their cable providers, to see if they're really getting the speeds that are being advertised and the people are being billed for. And word is they're coming up seriously, significantly short. You're not getting what you think you're getting. You're not getting what you paid for. Now then, we've got this other story coming out of The Guardian regarding light bulb manufacturers, Aiea, Philips, General Electric, and Osram. And apparently these people are putting out false efficiency claims about their light bulbs. We're getting back into this whole Toyota, we're going to rig the software to make it look like it's fuel efficient and clean, for the testing. And what they're finding is these big brand names are making false claims about how efficient and how bright their light bulbs are. And I already noticed it because, we've gone to LED bulbs here for the environmental reasons, and they're never as bright as the tungsten ones that they claim they replace. And apparently there is something called a leeway, which is a tolerance for testing, and the manufacturers are taking advantage of it, and they're pushing all the way to the end, and this is how they get away with it. And we know government isn't enforcing its own rules against companies. Probably everybody listening to this show has signed up for the do not call list for telemarketers, and yet we're still being flooded with calls from telemarketers. They created the list to make it look like government was responsive to the people in dealing with it, but it didn't actually do anything. Now then, following hard on the heels of America's failure as a manufacturing country, there's now a new report that Chrysler and Dodge have a defect in transmissions used in some of their cars, which has resulted in driver death. This is a little more serious than that ignition switch. It's a little more serious than rigging the software in the car's computer to dodge the fuel efficiency and emissions tests. This is a major problem with the actual transmission of the car that has resulted in driver deaths. Meanwhile, EE has recalled all their power bar USB batteries due to a fire safety risk. Seems like the things are exploding. But they'll give you a voucher so you can buy other EE products. Isn't that sweet of them? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a listener just sent in a link to a video. We've had it up on WhatReallyHappened.com before. But it's a documentary about the e-waste problem, about how all these electronic devices that we buy and use for a couple, 3 years and then throw away, how the attempt to recycle materials from them has created a major toxic problem in some parts of the world. So we posted that video back to WhatReallyHappened.com. And again, Al Gore and his people, they've got their knickers in a twist over carbon dioxide, but not a word about the highly toxic environmental damage from this e-waste. Because it makes money, and that's what makes it good. Now, speaking of making money, and you are all going to love this. Remember Martin Shkreli, former hedge fund manager, and he bought this pharmaceutical company and cranked up the price of some critically needed drugs by something like 9,000%. Because it makes money, and that makes it good. He has been arrested following a securities probe. He's been charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and securities fraud. So, good. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Now, we have all been hearing the ads about wounded warriors. And I'm sure all of us resonate with that message. We have to take care of our wounded veterans because obviously the Veterans Administration isn't doing it. And so we all want to help our wounded veterans. It's a very noble instinct. Unfortunately, it appears to be taken advantage of because there's an expose that came out over in dailyheadlines.net about how much money Wounded Warriors takes in and how very little of it actually goes out to help the veterans. In fact, the salaries for the top officers at Wounded Warriors are larger than the entire amount handed out annually to actual individual veterans. So, if you want to help a veteran, go on out, find a veteran, and help them directly. Because that way you know 100% of what you are doing goes to help them. Speaking of the Veterans Administration, John Wooditch, the former Department of Veterans Affairs top watchdog, has been forced to resign after being caught indulging in a little, how do I put this delicately so we don't lose our broadcast license, autoerotic satisfaction at the Veterans Affairs building in an all-glass conference room in full view of people across the street, including school teachers attending an education conference. Now, I know we want transparency in government, but I think this is a little over the line here. We're going to take a phone call here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Referring back, Mr. Putin had one of his annual Meet the Press Days, press conference. I think there was about 1,400 journalists there. And I was listening to that and looking at other information, and what Mr. Putin appeared to say without actually saying it in strictly, straight terms, that if, this spat with Turkey gets worse and Turkey closes the Bosphorus and Dardanelles, Mr. Putin is prepared to blast his way through with nukes.
I don't think Putin is going to use nuclear weapons, and if you look at the topology of the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus, he doesn't need nuclear weapons. Basically, they can send their ships through, and anybody who challenges them can be handled with the conventional weapons. If he uses a nuclear weapon, then the strait is useless to everybody because of the contamination. So I don't think he's going to use nukes. But rite of passage in and out of the Black Sea is guaranteed under the Montreux Convention. And if Turkey tries to close that, it's a violation of treaty. It's going to upset a lot of people besides Russia. And Russia would have standing to bring the matter to the United Nations. And if the United Nations wouldn't act, and I'm sure the U.S. would veto that UNSC resolution, every nation state has a right to protect their sea lanes of communication.
Yeah, well, as I say, Michael, it appeared that was basically what he was hinting at, but maybe we're going to get some clarification later. But certainly, what he seemed to indicate that if Turkey closed that Bosphorus, that would be an act of war against Russia.
I can see Putin seeing it that way, but again, we all know there's a tremendous possibility, horrible possibility of nuclear weapons being used in this coming war here. But I'm going to wager this solid silver George Washington quarter I found in the change machine the other day that Putin will not be the first one to use nuclear weapons.
Oh, by the way, just to encourage your last two callers, the GWX software works wonderfully. It removes everything, including the folder that Windows 10 tries to insert itself into.
Well, I've got it on my Windows 7 machine. I've got it on this donated laptop. The problem is we are hearing that Microsoft is trying to find some way where they can basically get around any third-party blocks. And again, this degree of arrogance. And again, if I turn on this machine here some morning and Windows 10 is there, I'm going to format the hard drive and go to Linux. Okay, so if there's anybody from Microsoft listening to this broadcast, you are really pissing off your customer base with this attitude problem.
That's two of us, and I've got my Linux disk ready.
Yeah, I got one too. I got it the boxed set right over there, ready to go.
and apparently it comes with a lot of open source other programs, Word and what have you. So you're not going to be losing anything.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, OpenOffice will run on Linux. I mean, I can do all that I'm doing here to support the radio show and the website on Linux without any question. The part I'm going to miss are the production tools that I use for making our videos, recording Claire's music. I know there are Linux equivalents out there. It would be a problem. And again, I'm forced to spend months rebuilding what I already have here working right now. And that is really angering a lot of people. And, let me make one more comment because we're almost out of time here. If people are waking up and finding Windows 10 on their machine, and all of a sudden their business software isn't working, I think it's going to be time for a class action lawsuit against Microsoft. To recover the cost of all of our broken software, to recover the loss of business. And I know that end user license agreement says, that they can mess you up and you can't do anything about it. I think it's time for a Supreme Court challenge on that attitude. And the reason we have that end-user license agreement is way back in the days of the Apple II and the IBM PC, the computer industry lobbied Congress for indemnification from product liability because it was a fragile new industry. Well, it's not a fragile new industry anymore. It's an economic powerhouse with resources in the billions of dollars. They don't need to be protected from product liability anymore. And the longer Congress turns a blind eye to this, we're going to continue to have this kind of abusive behavior from our hardware and software manufacturers.
Well, I think Microsoft hasn't pulled their gun all the way out of the holster and it shot itself in the foot.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. They've created a lot of anger, and I think Microsoft sales are not doing very well. People are going to switch over to the Mac. In fact, that might be an option for me because I can get my animation and production software for the Macintosh, and maybe it's time to make that leap. John, we got to let you go and take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. We're going to start off with Mark in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I don't know, I just got home. I don't know if you talked about it earlier, but I see that Vladimir Putin actually practically endorsed Donald Trump today.
Yes.
And, the media and the neocon, people like that are having a cow now. They think this is going to take down Trump's reign. Well, I got news for them. Most of us who really follow the news, and if they went to the real media, like the internet, and looked at the comments, they find out most people in this country like Putin. I personally think Putin's a great statesman. Is probably the one force, Russia's the one force today that's keeping the New World Order from totally taking over. Okay?
I would agree with that. And I'll tell you what really gets me angry is this double standard and hypocrisy in the U.S. corporate media. That Putin shouldn't be making comments on the American political race or any kind of endorsements. At the same time, they're out there saying which presidential candidate will be best for Israel.
Oh, not only that, look how they try to influence Russia's election.
Oh, and, yeah.
Look at the Ukraine. Look at the problem these scum have caused to Ukraine. So I mean, this to me is just great. This goes back to PNAC. We're the superpower. We have a right to tell other countries, what they're going to do with their people and their resources. Those countries don't have a right to tell us. We tell them, and that's that whole American empire mentality at work. And do you know that a lot of people don't realize this? That John Ellis Bush, also known as Jeb, was one of the premier people in PNAC. He was in one of the big meetings they had when they called for basically a new Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
To get America involved. I think it was 1999.
Yep.
John Ellis Bush was there. So I mean, these people, they're not fooling anybody, but they think they're smart. You watch. If anything, I think Trump's ratings are going to go up even more. To me, this is a great endorsement. This is a better endorsement than some hack clown here in this country endorsed him. This is awesome.
Yeah, and Forbes was out there. Trying to draw parallels between Trump and Putin, and they tried to pitch it as a negative, but all they did was put on display all the reasons why people like Trump and like Putin. These are guys who are speaking their mind and doing what they think is best rather than simply being sock puppets for whatever corporate interest is behind them, or Israel.
My problem is with Russia, though. I have one big problem with them, and that's I'm jealous, because they got a man like Putin as the head of their country, and look what we've got in this country. And I'm not just talking about Obama. I'm talking about the whole bunch, Congress, the Senate, and what passes for bad leadership. And hopefully Trump is going to change that. Hopefully he's going to be a real man and bring the United States back to what we should be, and stop listening and get out of the New World Order. As a matter of fact, destroy the New World Order. That's what I'm hoping he does.
I would agree with you on that. I certainly hope the same thing, because the New World Order is a global fascist empire. And fascism is great for the people at the top and terrible for everybody living underneath it. In fact, basically fascism is a repackaging of medieval serfdom.
Really, the New World Order is actually international corporation. That's really what it is.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what fascism is. Corporate control of the planet. Corporate control of the civil government. And
they have no loyalty to the United States.
No, none whatsoever, and no sensitivity to the needs of the civil population. Corporate rule is actually a step back from the nation state. In fact, it's virtually identical to theocratic rule, where everything is justified either by profitability or the will of the imaginary playmate in the sky, and what the ordinary people need and want is just absolutely not part of the equation. At least with the nation state, with democratic processes, the leaders have to be responsive to the needs of the civil population to some extent, or they're not going to keep their jobs.
Right.
Okay.
And I think, and that's why they're so afraid of Trump,
Oh, yeah. He can't be bought. He's got his own money.
He's not owned by them, and he, I believe he is a patriot. He's not a member of the New World Order. He actually is a patriot, as is Putin in Russia.
Yes.
He's a true patriot. And it would be great if they were both, presidents at the same time. All right.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over here to James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Since you brought up planned obsolescence and operating systems, I have a couple comments on each issue. That was one thing that the Soviets basically had right, was they didn't have planned obsolescence. They actually used things until they wore out. Of course, if we had a free enterprise, libertarian-type economy, manufacturing, industrial, technological, with no planned obsolescence, we would eventually have to find something to occupy our time. On the subject of operating systems, I still use XP and a lot of antiquated software as well.
Yeah, my wife's machine is still XP, and in fact, the machine that I'm running my Skype connection on is an XP machine. And over here, I've got this Vista box, which somebody gave me, and it's basically sitting idle at this point.
The discussion reminds me of something Joseph Sobran wrote about 30 years ago in National Review. He said, how many conservatives does it take to change a light bulb?
And the answer?
One, after reflecting on the greatness of the last one.
I love it.
Right,
but you're absolutely right about the old Soviet Union, because the Soviet leadership understood their society couldn't support the idea of people constantly having to buy the same thing over and over and over again. That the only way the Soviet Union was going to improve and progress is if people bought something and it was going to last for 20, 25 years, so that they could take their money and buy something else they also needed. And it was that was actually one of the things that worked in the Soviet Union. Now, the U.S., used to make fun of the Soviet Union. Oh, look, they're driving a 10-year-old car. They're using because the car was still running after 10 years. And, here in the U.S., the business model is for you to work as hard as you can so that you can buy the same thing over and over and over again. A new computer every 5 years, a new car every 5 years. No matter how hard you work, you can't improve your life because you're constantly replacing what you already bought before. And especially in the realm of computers, that includes a huge amount of labor. It can take up to a month for somebody to reconstruct a new system to the usability of the system that they were just forced to step down from.
Well, also, since just about every other chemical waste except CO2 that industry puts out is a problem. This planned obsolescence is also creating a problem with pollution.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. It's a huge problem. Toxic materials going into the landfills. And again, it's almost laughable to see all these environmental people screaming about carbon dioxide and climate change, and yet they won't address this issue of the toxic environmental damage coming out of e-waste. And that right there tells you they're just out for the bucks. They want carbon taxes. They want to make money selling you carbon credits. They don't really care about the earth, or they would be looking at these other issues.
Right. That's all I got for you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, a lot of people were wondering who it was who bought the Las Vegas Review-Journal, because it changed hands recently, and the new owners were isolated, hidden. Nobody wanted to say who bought it, but it finally came out. It was bought by Sheldon Adelson to use for putting out his message for the coming election year, and apparently his son-in-law did the purchase on his behalf. But it's now come on out, and everybody's saying, yeah, Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate and backer of all but one of the GOP candidates, wanted that newspaper. Because he's still living in the age of ink and paper here. Let's see. Donald Trump took on MSNBC's Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews wanted to get him onto the question about whether Barack Obama was a legitimate president or not. Trump dodged it and said, look, if you start talking about that, then you're not going to talk about the economy, and that's what we've got to talk about. So Trump is staying on message. He's staying on focus, and that's a good one there. And again, another article coming out of AI Monitor, which U.S. presidential candidate is good for Israel? At the same time, they're screaming about Putin trying to influence our elections. Got to take a break for our top-of-the-hour commercials and news. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Now then, we were talking before we went to the news break about Vladimir Putin. Is an admirer of Donald Trump, as are we all. And the American media is trying to use that as a negative against Donald Trump. And they're not getting a lot of traction because a lot of people admire Vladimir Putin for keeping a lid on this rush to war so far. Now, Israel does not like Donald Trump. A lot of people are trying to say, oh, he's in Israel's pockets. But Donald Trump has said if he's elected president, one of his top agendas is going to be bringing peace between Israel and Palestine. And that's not what Israel wants. They want somebody like Marco Rubio, who was at the Republic Jewish Coalition and saying peace is a far-off dream. It'll never occur in our lifetimes. So they're out there doing that. And again, the hypocrisy of the corporate media is fully on display. Putin shouldn't be interfering with America's elections, but which candidate is best for Israel? Now, Donald Trump's poll numbers have hit a new record high. At the same time, Obama's approval rating hits a record low. Now, they're claiming Obama's job performance rating is at 43%. I think that number is being fudged a little bit, so of course we ran our own poll at WhatReallyHappened.com, and as of the last time I checked, responding to the question, do you approve of President Obama's job performance, 3% said yes, 97% said no. Reality lies somewhere between those two extremes. Now, there's an article over at PatriotRising.com. Is Hillary heading for the big house? And they don't mean the White House. They mean prison. And they're dealing with the chain of events that was started when Judicial Watch filed a Freedom of Information Act request for information regarding Libya and some other issues. And that was what led to the revelation of the private email server. Nobody knew about it outside of Hillary and Obama and a few people at the State Department. And that has now come on out. Now, Hillary certified under threat of perjury that she did not have classified emails on her server. We now know that she did. We now know that the emails were classified when she received them, because she had come on out and said, well, maybe they're classified now, but they weren't classified when I got them. Yes, they were, Hillary. Now there's an FBI investigation, and I don't really trust the FBI to do an honest investigation, because the FBI's prior record with the Clintons is covering up their crimes, like the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, which is what got me kicked out of Hollywood and launched my career as a truther all those years ago. But there's a law out there that says it is a crime to steal any federal property. And that includes government-owned communication, the digital data that went from government control to her private email server outside government control and monitoring represents a theft of federal property. Now, they're probably not going to do anything about that, because when the Clintons left the White House, they looted that place as well. They were forced to give some of it back. But it's all catching up to her. And as a matter of fact, the latest poll numbers are showing that Bernie Sanders is closing in on Hillary. They're now within a few percentage points. Now, Hillary's probably not worried, because word has come out of the Democratic National Committee that Hillary already has all the superdelegates in her camp. And the superdelegates are literally empowered to overrule the primary results. Now, the superdelegates were invented after Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, when the Democrats got saddled with George McGovern. And they said, well, we've got to have the means to decide for ourselves, for the party machine to pick the best possible candidate in the face of stupid Americans who voted the wrong guy in. Of course, we know in hindsight that the American people never had a voice in it. George McGovern was picked to be Nixon's opposition by the Nixon re-election campaign. They went out and sabotaged all of the potential threatening Democratic candidates, so Nixon could walk all over George McGovern, which is what happened. But they used that as the excuse to create the superdelegate system. Now let's get on to Ted Cruz, because more and more people are starting to get caught up in this argument. Is Ted Cruz eligible to run for the presidency? No, he is not. Now, at this point, nobody can actually document that Ted Cruz's mother was born in Delaware. There's no documentation to support it. Ted Cruz's supporters, who are clearly willing to walk all over the Constitution to get their boy in, which means they'll walk all over the Constitution if he does get in, are out there saying, well, if he's got one American mother, he's a U.S. citizen and he can run. He's a U.S. citizen, but he can't run because of the natural born requirement. Then they come on back and say, well, there's no real definition of what natural born means. It could be this or that. As it turns out, there are no less than 4 Supreme Court cases defining that a natural born citizen is somebody born inside the United States or its territories or possessions of American citizens. And all of it goes back to, we were talking earlier in the week about the Law of Nations, which was published in, the first version of it was published in about 10, 20 years before the United States became the United States. George Washington had a copy which he borrowed from a library and never returned, as it turns out. But there are these 4 cases, and they all unanimously said exactly the same thing. Shanks versus DuPont, Minor versus Happersett, United States versus Wong Kim Ark. There has never been a Supreme Court decision that defined natural-born citizen as anything other than born inside this country of 2 American parents. That's the requirement to run for President of the United States of America. Ted Cruz doesn't match it, doesn't meet it. So that is the law. That's the law under which that was put into the Constitution. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed it in 4 separate cases. Now, the fact that the GOP committee is still allowing him to be a candidate tells us that institutionally the Republicans have no respect for the Constitution and the rule of law anymore. They're all ignoring the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And in my opinion, this renders the entire political system of the United States of America illegal, unconstitutional, and totally illegitimate. And if they're not going to abide by the contract with America, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, then we, the people, are freed from all obligations to them. Can't be a one-way deal where we do what we're told and the government breaks the rules. I don't think so. Not going to happen. The House has passed a new budget bill which funds Planned Parenthood for the next 9.5 months. So despite all the Sturm und Drang over their very questionable procedures with selling body parts, they got their government money back. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about immigration. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, looking at the immigration issue, and we're already starting to see the beginnings of the collapse of this effort to try and blend us all together. Angela Merkel's done 180 degrees in saying multiculturalism is a hoax. When you blend all these different cultures in the same location, they form their little internal parallel societies. There's not a lot of crosstalk across it. We already knew that from cities like Los Angeles that have Chinatown or Koreatown, the little enclaves where they keep their cultural identity. This is not a surprise to anybody. Now, Denmark is launching a plan or considering a plan where any Syrian refugees coming into the country will have valuables taken by the government, ostensibly to offset the cost of the refugees being there. And they're talking about seizing jewelry and other personal valuables. It's a little extreme, but it tells us how the resistance to this refugee crisis is building. And everybody's screaming about racism and, we've got to take care of these people. And nobody will get up there and say that we solved the refugee problem by stopping the wars on their countries that made them refugees to begin with. All right, getting on back to computers, and I'm getting all kinds of emails saying, this is how you block Windows 10. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. And Microsoft is apparently actively trying to find ways to bypass it. Somebody came on in and said, well, just turned off the Windows Update service. The problem with that is you don't get the security patches you need, and you don't get the repairs to all the bugs that are in your operating system. Because Microsoft will release a new operating system with thousands of known bugs with the attitude of, well, we'll patch it somewhere down the road after the money comes on in. So, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. You need those security patches. You need the software to be repaired and made working. But you open the door to the Windows 10 update. Now then, as you know, the U.S. government is once again on the warpath against personal encryption. They're back on it following Paris, following San Bernardino, even though it has now come out that the people who carried out the attacks in Paris were sending messages in the clear. They weren't even using encryption. Now, the FBI is out there saying that the San Bernardino shooters were not posting messages about jihad to social media. That may have been true, but I think the reason the FBI came out and say that was everybody was saying, look, if you're monitoring all social media through the NSA, why didn't you see these people? So they had to back off the story that the patsies were posting all this pro-jihad stuff. Oh, no, they didn't really put it out there. They were invisible to us. That's what makes them dangerous. Well, if they're invisible to you and they're not using social media or the internet to communicate, why are you declaring war on our encryption? And the government is back to this idea of mandating us all to use an encryption system to which the government has a backdoor. And there are two problems with that. First of all, for most of us, it's the government we want to keep out of our data. Because of all the times government intelligence people with access to those back doors have been stealing our business data for their own personal property, or stealing pictures of our significant others in states of undress so they can whack off to them, you know, in the all-glass conference room at Veterans Affairs in full view of a teachers' convention across the street. There's some very sick people working for the government. But there's this article over here in the Washington Post, no less, which really says what the problem is. These secret back doors for the government are inevitably found by real cyber criminals. In mandating any system where the government has a backdoor to your encryption, they have created a backdoor for criminals to steal your business secrets. And from the point of view of the government, the security of your business secrets and your personal papers is just not important compared to being able to find the criminals and terrorists, even though we know the criminals and terrorists basically stay off the open internet and have the means to develop their own systems of encryption which the NSA cannot defeat, which we proved with our NSA Challenge series. 6 different systems of encryption, nobody ever broke them. They just want to spy on you, to steal your business secrets, to take the naked pictures of your sons and daughters and wives and girlfriends and whatever to add to their personal free porn collection. That's what they've got in that giant data center in Utah, the world's biggest porn library. Because we already know they can't find the criminals and they can't find the terrorists. So the reason they're doing this is to spy on you, the law-abiding citizen, to profit from your enterprise for their personal enjoyment. And all of this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which says, absent a warrant based on probable cause that you have committed a crime, the government is not allowed to peek into your private life. Now, getting on back to the budget bill that the House passed, the good news is NASA got a good budget for 2016. I'm always in favor of space development because of the technological fallout that stimulates new business and products here in the United States. Unfortunately, Congress also hid the entirety of the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act in that bill. And because it was a must-pass bill, it got voted through. So more authorization for them to spy on you, steal your business secrets, so forth and so on. John McAfee is out there issuing a warning that a cyber war could actually be more damaging to the planet as a whole than an exchange of nuclear weapons. And he's actually right. An exchange of nuclear weapons, it's confined to the targets. A cyber war could literally bring down the entire internet and bring all online commerce to a halt, including the banking systems. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call here. Sherry in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good evening, Michael. Well, I'm totally confused now with the Supreme Court's definition of natural born that both parents have to be U.S. citizens. Well, then, how is Barack Obama eligible?
Frank Marshall was a U.S. citizen.
Oh, so it doesn't matter what his birth certificate says, who his father is, and what name?
Barack, we've covered this so many times, but I'm going to do it one more time.
I know.
Okay, Barack Obama is a love child. Okay, his real father is, you know, by the way, the Supreme Court didn't say the parents had to be natural born. They can be naturalized as well, okay? But they have to be American citizens, and they have to, and the child to be eligible for president has to be born inside the United States of America. Canada does not count. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call real quick. Chuck in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. On the McAfee thing, I posted on that this morning because he was saying that ISIS is much smarter than we know, and there can be a cyber attack.
Well, they are. I mean, we know Israel is supporting ISIS, and Israel's got the highest per capita concentration of hackers of any nation on the planet.
Right, but my point was, what part of USIS does McAfee not get?
Well,
it's not ISIS, it's USIS.
Yeah, well, whatever name they're calling themselves by, but again, my concern is, and it dovetails with McAfee's concern, is that the next 9/11 may be a virtual one, where they crash the internet and all the financial computers and say, oh, golly gee whiz, we were on the verge of having an economic recovery. I mean, Yellen was saying that earlier in the week, their grand recession is over, and then they pull a virtual 911 and crash all the system, blame it on Russia, Iran, China, whoever it is they want to invade next week. And in bringing the internet back up, magically all the corporate websites and servers will be online, and the independent media, well, there's still a technical glitch out here. We can't seem to find a way to connect you.
Absolutely. I just think we all need to call him out a little bit and say, wait a minute, what part of we are ISIS don't you get? Our government is ISIS, don't you get?
Your point is definitely valid, but McAfee's making a valid point, that if the internet is hacked by whoever it is, ISIS, Israel, U.S. government, the actual damage to ordinary people around the globe is actually going to be more severe than losing a couple of cities in a nuclear exchange.
Well, I'm hoping that you have been doing everything you can to feather your nest as I am now, so that we preppers can say, okay, it's over. We're going fishing. Let the rest of the people eat each other.
I'm afraid my nest is not well feathered at all. I mean, everything I've got goes into, maintaining the website and the radio show, and I don't get paid by GCN to be here. So this is a labor of love, and unfortunately, we've only got one or two feathers left there in the nest. All right, Chuck, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here, and I need to get on to some stories here. Human-caused global warming. Somebody did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and figured out that the COP21 climate summit in Paris actually produced more carbon dioxide emissions from all the luxury jets and cars and everything than it actually solved. And that, of course, is understandable. The COP21 agreement doesn't even talk about fossil fuels and carbon. It's all economic measures to take wealth away from the developed nations and give it to the third world nations, or let's be honest, to the governments of those third world nations. And that leads to an article that's over on WorldNet Daily, where the whole climate scam is all about bringing on socialism. The liberals' wet dream. We're going to use global warming to bring about a socialist utopia. Talk to anybody who lived in the former Soviet Union. Socialism is nobody's idea of a utopia, unless you're part of the Politburo. Meanwhile, out here in the real world, first big snowstorm of season piles it on the western states. 24 inches of snow in the Colorado mountains. Hundreds of miles of highways slippery with snow and ice. California feels the chill as Denver gets record snow. Fort Collins set a snow record. Highway 287 was closed for a while. It's been reopened. And actually, Fort Collins set a single-day snow record for that date, an all-time record. They didn't even have a previous one. Well, actually, the previous record was 4 inches in 1988. Single-day record for snowfall set in Rapid City, beating the record set back in 1908. Columbia River Gorge braces for more winter weather. It's coming on. It was a little delayed because of El Nino, which is the fault of volcanoes and not human activity. But that hard winter that was predicted by the Old Farmer's Almanac and a lot of other very objective, not on Al Gore's payroll people, it's showing up, and we're still officially in fall. Now then, I posted a flashback to an article in 2012. Misconduct widespread in retracted science papers study finds. Now, this is 3 years ago. And they were talking about the rapid increase in the number of supposedly peer-reviewed scientific papers published in journals that had to be retracted when they found out either there was a mistake or, as the majority of cases, there was outright fraud. Outright fraud. See, what's going on is the ruling class knows you don't listen to your preachers any longer, who tell you that God wants you to go along with what Caesar wants. You will pay more money, you will go to war, you will fling your babies onto the enemy's bayonets. In the wake of the sexual molestation epidemic, which is hitting pretty much every religion to some degree or other. People aren't letting the guys in the priest robes tell them what to think anymore. So the rulers have switched over to scientists in their white lab coats, and they're using those as the new religious leaders. You will believe in this because we've got this well-paid person in a white laboratory coat assuring you that it's true. And you will believe it because they're scientists and you are not. Now, where that breaks down, of course, is for those of us who have a scientific background. And we're not part of the official scientific system that is bought and paid for with funding. But I think everybody ought to be their own scientist. You know, looking at the Common Core curriculum, there's a dearth of actual science education. A lot of indoctrination, global warming and all the rest. But they don't teach our kids how to think and analyze and decide for themselves. Because that's dangerous. Another article coming out of Natural News. The new multi-toxin GMOs are already being seen as creating serious health and environmental risks. Now, what they mean by the multi-toxin GMOs is the first GMOs that came out producing their own toxin, the BT line of crops, the pests evolved to become tolerant to the pesticide produced by the plant. Nature doing what nature does. So the GMO companies, rather than say this was not a good idea to begin with, they're coming out with new GMO crops that produce multiple pesticides. And you eat that when you eat these products. And if you get sick, well, that's good for the economy because then you have to go to the doctor and you have to go to the pharmacy and you have to buy drugs and spend more of your money. And that's a good thing. Anything that gets the economy ticking along, that's a good thing. And if you're sick, stop whining and complaining and just get out your checkbook or your credit card here. Now, over in the Philippines, their Supreme Court has banned all GMO products from the country to protect the indigenous farmers who want to use heritage seeds and traditional farming methods. GMOs are now banned in the Philippines. And you know the Philippines are now going to have a wonderful time exporting GMO-free food, just like Russia. People are going to want to buy that stuff. Now, the other day we were talking about this random stabbing that happened in Great Britain and how the corporate media was deleting all the comments asking if the attacker was on prescription antidepressants. They're getting really, really nervous because there's clearly a link. And we're seeing more and more indications of fraud to sell the product. Again, over in Natural News, they're quoting an article in the journal Science saying that 64% of the experiments claim to support the efficacy of these prescription psychological medications can't be reproduced. And if there's no reproducibility, there's no science. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program on this Sure Happy It's Thursday. And want to talk about medications. We were just talking about how a large number of the so-called studies that claim prescription psychiatric medications work cannot be reproduced. And the essence of scientific method is reproducibility. That I should be able to carry out the same exact experiment or study or analysis that you did, starting from the same specimens or data, and come to the same result. And if you can't, there's a problem. And the fact that so many of these studies are being found to be non-reproducible tells us that science has been corrupted by the money junkies in this country. It's just another sales pitch. We have a guy in a white laboratory coat. How could you doubt him? Now, there is a backlash against corporatized, controlled science, and I want to draw a line there, because I think science and scientific method is a really good thing. I'm a science buff. I love astronomy. I love building things. I like experimentation. But corporatized, politicized science has become one of the most powerful propaganda tools to get you to go along with things you don't want to do. Now, over in Ireland on TV3, they actually ran a documentary about the HPV vaccine featuring 150 girls who suffered permanent debilitating harm from Gardasil. Now, we put up an article on WhatReallyHappened.com. This one came out of LiveLeak about girls here in the United States who just up and died following Gardasil vaccinations. And the manufacturers of Gardasil are saying, oh, well, all of these people, that they had something else was wrong with them and that we're not to blame. But we're starting to see a pushback here. Now, you know that mandatory flu vaccination in New York for kids 6 months to 5 years to go to Head Start, preschool, or daycare? The New York State Supreme Court just knocked it down. So they're starting to push back. If we are really free, if we have freedoms that the terrorists hate us for, the first freedom has to be to decide what goes into our body and what does not. That's absolutely essential. All right. Let's see. Police union president arrested for beating her own daughter. Blamed it on the kid. I wonder if she's on prescription antidepressants here. Now then, there was a Secret Service Uniform Division officer, Arthur Baldwin, and he had lost his job. He'd been suspended. Still had his job, but he was suspended. Apparently, he was arrested and charged with first-degree attempted burglary and destruction of property last April. And apparently, Tuesday afternoon, somebody shot and killed him in Washington, D.C. And I got to tell you, that makes me a little nervous that these are the people they have protecting the Obamas. They're not very impressive. And again, going back to that, officer at the Veterans Affairs whacking off in an all-glass conference room in full view of everybody. Is there some process when you get hired by the government where they go in and they mess around with your brain to create this aberrant behavior? Is there something in the water in Washington, D.C.? Are they all mandated to have vaccines and prescription antidepressants, and is that what's messing them up? All righty, getting on to guns and gun bans here for the rest of the show here over at PatriotRising.com. Armed citizens pull guns, save 90-year-old man under attack. This happened back on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. And, of course, you did not hear about this on the corporate media, did you? You're not supposed to know that guns can actually save people. The message from the corporate media, guns are bad. Guns are bad. You've got to hate guns. Now, over in Keene, Texas, in their school district, they have now been told they may carry arms at school in order to protect against a potential repeat of Sandy Hook. People are beginning to understand when something bad happens, a crime, an act of terror, there are only two parties present, the perpetrators and the victims. And if you want to stop these things from happening, you have to arm the victims so you can deter the perpetrators. It is very obvious at this point. The government cannot intervene and prevent these things from happening. Of course, we know that our government wants these things to happen to sell the anti-gun agenda. But they're working at cross purposes here. The only thing that stops a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. They don't want you to know that. They're still out there pushing, guns are completely useless. They're only there to do one thing, and that's kill people. Well, somebody's trying to kill me, they need killing. Common sense. That was in Keene, Texas. Person in the chat room asking for a clarification here. Now, over at Disneyland, itself and Disney's California Adventure, they're now placing metal detectors at the entryway where you go on in. And beginning today, prohibiting and banning toy gun possession and sales inside the park. Now, the last time I tried to go to Disneyland with Claire, they had the searching the backpacks and it was a huge line. And we turned around and left We didn't even get inside the park. We said, to heck with this, we're going away. This was not the happiest place on earth, because I remember Disneyland as it used to be, where you walked in and you had fun and that was it. This was before the FBI used it for that staged hippie riot to discredit the anti-war movement. When I first went to Disneyland, and yes, I was 12 years old, there was a shooting gallery in Frontierland. And they had toy guns for sale in all the stores. Little simulated flintlocks, Kentucky rifles, because it is a part of our American heritage to keep and bear arms and to use them safely and to know how to handle them. But now even Disneyland is politically correct. Guns are bad. Guns are bad. You don't want guns. Apparently, House Democrats are trying to resurrect Bill Clinton's federal assault weapons ban. Why are they targeting assault weapons? Because those are the weapons which in the hands of the people can deter government tyranny. Assault weapons are not used in crimes. Crimes committed with firearms involve little, inexpensive, easily disposable, concealable handguns. Only the staged false flag hoaxes use assault weapons. Because that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of you having arms equal to those held in the hands of the police and military, even though the United States Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Miller, the Second Amendment reserves to you, the American people, weapons equivalent to those held by the uniformed services. But they're afraid of you. That's why they want to take away the assault guns, and if they can't do that, they want to limit the magazine size so that they can shoot more bullets at you than you can shoot back at them. That's really what it's all about. Weakening the public so we cannot resist the march toward tyranny. And that's what's going on here. Last story for today, a little bit of good news coming out of Japan's space program. As you know, they had the Akutsuki planetary probe going to Venus. Its main engine died in space. They were able to use the Attitude jets over 5 years to finally put it into orbit around Venus. Congratulations, Japan. That's how you deal with broken hardware. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We got a lot to do, Claire and I, for the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, here on Genesis Communication Network. Until then, please call your local talk radio stations. Point them at gcnlive.com. Ask that they carry our programming. Thanks to everybody who's called. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.